Ben Sledge, welcome to the show today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to give you a quick introduction. If I miss anything, please elaborate, fill in the gaps, whatever we need to do to so people know a little bit more about you. Today's guest is someone who's walked through hell and come back with a mission. Ben Sledge is a combat veteran. He's a Christian award-winning author and mental health advocate whose powerful storytelling has moved audiences across the country. He has served in Iraq and Afghanistan with Special Operations Unit, and his journey from the battlefield to battling PTSD and rediscovering purpose. His book, Where Cowards Go to Die, pulls no punches and offers a brutally honest look at war, trauma, and redemption. Get ready for a real, unfiltered conversation about courage, healing, success, and what it means to truly come home. Let's get started. Thank you also to our friend Scott Husing for introducing us to making this happen. So I really appreciate it. Ben, anything you want to? Did I miss anything that you want to
No,
let fill
I
in?
think you got it. I think you got it.
All right. I missed a lot of your awards, but we'll talk a little bit about that down the
Uh,
road here. So, uh, how many years did you serve, Ben?
11. I served
11 years.
11. Yeah, yeah. I probably would have retired, but I had gone over that 10-year mark and I just had passed the board for E7 and they asked me if I wanted to re-enlist and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do another couple years. And they're like, no, this is an indefinite reenlistment. I was like, I'm
Oh,
not.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, for the Army after 10 years and you pick up a senior non-commissioned officer, it's an indefinite reenlistment.
oh, wow. I didn't
So
know they had a time frame. I only did 6.5 years, so I didn't get up to a high NCL. So it's like, okay, interesting. I don't know if that's the way it's in the Marine Corps. Did learn something new already today. Awesome. Did you join right out of high school, and did you always want to join the Army?
yeah, so funny enough, I almost joined the Marines initially.
Okay,
So and I'll give you the backstory behind that. I had always wanted to join the military. I always had the posters on my wall. I had like the old Army Be All You Can Be poster on above my bed, and then I also had a Marine Corps one. It was like the '80s stuff,
right.
especially when the Cold War was going on. So I grew up dreaming of fighting Russians. So, um, but initially. I knew that I was going to have to do it anyway, just because of the simple fact that I needed to find a way to pay for college. And my
Okay,
grandfather had been a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne in World War II. And then my other grandfather, he had been, I can't remember who he was with, but he was also served during World War II. My great uncles. And so we've traced it as far back as a general under Napoleon.
oh,
So we go
wow.
back, yeah, we go back pretty far. And the sledges all come from one guy, and his name was Thomas Sledge, and he immigrated to the United States from England. And
Okay,
then his son, John and Daniel Sledge, Captain Daniel Sledge, were American Revolutionary War patriots, and
nice.
they had seven of their sons fight in the American Revolutionary War. So we were some of the first, and then it just kind of trickled down from there. So kind of ran in the blood, and I knew that that was what I was going to end up doing. My parents were a little freaked out when the Marine Corps recruiters came and talked to them. They were like, "Yeah, the president can send us anywhere without congressional, approval," and they're like, "Nope." So,
Thanks for telling us that. Now he's out.
yeah, I mean, had they just kept it cool, I probably would have ended up joining the Marine Corps. But then, I talked with my grandfather. And my parents still wanted me to keep like this really safe, career. And they were like, why don't you pick like mail clerk or quartermaster or something? And I was like, that sounds dumb.
Right.
And I ended up meeting this guy in our area who was like, have you ever considered special operations? Your scores are really high. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Because I didn't really know anything about Green Berets or Rangers or anything else, and he said, "Well, there's this command called the Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Command," and I was like, "That sounds cool. I guess I'll do that." Never knowing that, like, what
Didn't
exactly
know
what
all
they
the
did.
details, but it sounded cool.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of how it ended up is like get money for college and impress girls in a uniform, stupid fickle stuff that teenagers think about. So yeah, I was literally 18 when I joined.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was the same way right out of high school. It's like we don't know any
Hmm.
better, and it's like, all right, whatever we could get, that'd be great. So thanks for sharing that. What was the most valuable lesson you learned while you were in the service?
There's been a couple. One of my favorite stories is just so when I first arrived in Afghanistan, I was really scared, and I don't think a lot of people have admitted, going to war that like there's this nervousness to it,
Right.
and uh, and so the team that I was with, I found out that my team sergeant wanted to go to the border area, and we had gotten this briefing from this Green Beret weapons sergeant. And we're like, what are all these stars over in this just like one concentrated area on the border with Pakistan? And he was like, oh, that's where everybody gets blown up and shot to hell. And he was like, that's where we're going. So I freaked out, and I was I was trying to work it to where I could stay in like a headquarters element as opposed to staying on a civil affairs team alpha. And my team sergeant sat me down, and he's a real gruff, kind of like Iceman character, but he's been one of my heroes just in my life, and just the lessons that he imparted. But he looked at me and he said, "Hey, I heard that you asked to stay behind." And I wouldn't really look at him and everything. And finally, he just admitted to me, he's like, "Hey, I'm scared too. I want to let you know that." Like, he said, but we've trained for this, and tomorrow we're all going to get on that chopper together, and we're all going to be afraid together. And then he just looked at me, and my nickname was Hollywood because I was kind of a jackass. Um, and he said, Hollywood, courage is doing the right thing even when you're afraid. And he said, tomorrow we're all going to be afraid, but we're all going to get on that chopper together, and we're all going to make it home together. And so I've just kind of continued to live by that motto that he said, even when I'm afraid, courage is doing the right thing.
Right.
Like whether that's speaking up about something that I see that's wrong, the way that people are treated, things that are going on, obviously in the VA health system where we can't get treatment, and things that really matter, things that are courageous, and really just kind of became, a big theme in my book as far as courage and fear and where that cowardice lurks in the human heart. So that to me was one of the most shining moments in my life. And then another time he said something else. We basically got into this like Mexican standoff on the border with these Pakistani border guards that we later found out had some terrorists in the cells, and I mean it was bad. There's like RPGs pointed at, and I was like, I don't want to get out of the truck, and he's like, get out of the truck, and I was like, and I'm like, I don't want to go meet with these guys. We're gonna get shot on the way, and we had the interpreter, so the infantry guys were like, man, we got to go up there, and it was like a gentleman's trash talking session, but. He just looked at me, and I said, why can't we wait for reinforcements? And he was like, no one's coming, man. He was like, it's up to us. And I realized in that moment, like, oh yeah, it's us. Like no one else is coming to save me. No one else is coming to help me. We're the last line of defense. And so I have to remember that too, like in my own life, that a lot of times, we wait for somebody else to come save us when things have difficult time periods, and it's up to us to put in the work and the effort. So those are the two of the biggest lessons that
That's
I
awesome.
learned.
That's awesome. And and we're always growing when we have hard challenges in front of us, right? So
Hmm.
that's when we really grow. I was actually listening to a pastor this morning, had a quick blurb, like for kids. When kids are growing up, it's like you don't have to force them to eat ice cream, right?
No.
But you but you
Dude,
do
my
have
kids, that's all they would eat.
but
That's all
you
my kids would
but you
eat.
do have to force them to eat the greens and stuff. So you know what? That's when we learn and on the hard part, which is awesome. So obviously we know no organization's perfect, right? We always have the 80-20 rule, including the service, including business, everything. What was one of the hardest or most personal professional challenge you faced while you were serving?
I had my first deployment a really bad OIC, officer in charge.
Okay.
And we ended up having to relieve him of command because there were several instances where he was just a loose cannon, almost got us killed. Just really difficult environment to work in, degraded team morale. And when you have, and I think like that's the thing that most people don't realize necessarily in the military, they just assume that everybody comes out, walking, talking like they're like, oh, companies want to hire veterans. And I was like, well, I know some dirtbags, and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't want to hire him. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to hire him. And professionally, I have found that those guys, because nobody wants to deal with them, they just get promoted out
Yes.
of the entity and organization as opposed to the administrative punishment that they need a lot of times. Whereas if you have a lower enlisted soldier, you can just take care of that immediately
Right.
as opposed to people doing the right thing. So it's difficult in that respect, just due to the chain of command and the way that things work in the military, that sometimes the bad apples really do rise to the top. And so
Right.
professionally, that was the most difficult thing that I dealt with overseas. And it happened again. We went an entire deployment. And then when we got home, like the team rallied and was like, this guy, he's got to go, man. And so they forced that guy to retire.
Wow.
So,
That's pretty
yeah.
good that they did that. A lot of times they just promote them and keep them in, right?
Hmm.
I had a colonel like that in Okinawa, and I was only there for a year, thank God. And looked him up recently, just starting this podcast. It's like, oh, I got promoted to general. It's like, of course you did.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
the crazy part. Like if you remember the shooting that happened at Fort Hood with Major Nadal Hassan, they literally just said he was a bad apple from the beginning, and they were just like, ah, just promote him out of everything, and then he ended up shooting and killing people.
Yeah, it's
So,
amazing. It's kind of eye-opening, because like I was mentioning earlier, right? It's you always have to keep that in mind no matter what you're doing. And I mentioned, business and the service, but even in church, you're going to see that in church as
mhm.
well. You're going to see good and bad people, so you got to
Well,
keep that in
especially in the
mind.
pulpit, like you see it a lot, and it's a lot of the celebrity pastors, and they get themselves in trouble because they think that they're owed something, and they're
Right,
not.
exactly. So I think that's something for people to keep in mind, the audience. It's like, you know what? Always take the good part, but there's always going to be bad apples in whatever you do. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Uh, Ben, people love to hear about missions. Which mission stands out for you after all these years?
Oh, geez. I mean, there are several. I think the one that is kind of the most shocking for a lot of people was this was during the Battle of Ramadi in 2006. This is actually when I was with Scott Husing's team, Major Scott
Oh, that's
Husing.
awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and so we were clearing the a section called Tamim, and then we were just doing a lot of clearing operations during that time period to basically rest out the insurgency that had taken over Ramadi. And so after Christmas Day, we literally left the gate, I think at midnight on Christmas Day. So it was technically the 26th at that point. So it was a weird Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Scott and I are pouring over maps, and I'm letting him know because it's his first time working in the district area that we're in. So he's wanting to know all the major choke points, everything else that we can garner, like who's good, who's bad. So we're filling him in on all this stuff, and then we walk out that gate, and start to take over homes. If you've seen the movie Warfare, it was very, very similar to that, because Warfare takes place in Ramadi during 2006 in November. We were there,
That's awesome.
and
Yeah, I
I
haven't
was on
seen it
the
yet. I need to watch it, but good.
yeah. It's easily the most realistic war film that I've seen. Be in a good headspace and go with friends, is that's what I tell people. But the thing that ended up happening was this this story just people are like, oh my gosh. And I like to, when I'm speaking, I like to ratchet up the tension from the stage. So what ended up happening is we ended up on this road that was permanently black called Millions. And the reason we called it Millions was there was like a million IEDs on
Oh my
this road.
gosh.
We
Right.
start seeing guys come out, we realize they're staging for an attack. I'm with these Marines who've never worked this area. And so me and my lieutenant, we go up and we're like, we got to get out of here. We're about to get hit. It's about to be a complex attack. They radio back to one of our combat outposts, and they're like, "You are on that road." They're like, "That road's permanent, but you're gonna get killed." And so as soon as the word gets in, we start making this mad dash like a mile away. So it's like a Mogadishu mile to make sure none of the shooting starts. So that works out well. We make it to the combat outpost to rally there before we head back out. And so I had worked at this combat outpost with First Infantry Division for a long time. So I meet with the first sergeant there, who I'm friends with, and he's like, "Hey, Sledge, where's the rest of your team at? I was like, they're on the other side of the city. They're doing clearing ops. He goes, we have troops in contact right now. I don't know if it's your dudes. And I'm like, crap. So we go to the roof to see, and like you can see these smoke plumes rising in the distance. I still have a photo of it.
Oh, wow.
And so when we're on the roof, we start taking fire from the alleyways and like kind of this nearby mosque and everything. And the mosque is like agitating people. They would give, these calls to like to attack the infidels and so on and so forth. So it slows down, and I'm running an EOTech red dot sight on my rifle at the time. And the first sergeant, he's running more of a high powered scope on his. So he hands me his rifle and he's like, hey man, he's like, don't shoot, take a look down this alleyway. And I look down this alleyway and there's this little girl, probably 6 or 7 years old. And she's waddling and she's carrying munitions. Like you can obviously tell what it is. And my heart sank because I knew this girl. She would hang around the combat outpost while we were doing civil military operations,
Oh, wow.
and like we would give her chocolate. And we called her the flower girl because she was always pick these yellow daisies, and she was always in like this yellow dress, and then give it to us.
Oh, my
She didn't
God.
speak a lick of English,
So you had a
but
kind
just
of,
super cute.
you had a sort of relationship with her already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is what the insurgents would do. They would use children to either ferry munitions or explosives or whatever it was to their positions, knowing that a lot of times American troops wouldn't shoot them, or if they did, they would kill an innocent child. It would create a stronger, more thriving insurgency. And the ROE at that point is clear. She's considered
Yeah,
an enemy
exactly. Yeah.
combatant at that point. And he just looks at me and he goes, technically, you can shoot her. And like, I'm having this internal battle just raging in my mind. And, I'm like, what if she reaches, because she's heading the direction of smoke plumes. I don't know that if my dudes are engaged. Well, come to find out, they are. It
Oh,
is
wow.
two of them. They're stuck on a rooftop. It's two of them versus about 15 to 20 insurgents. And they're just utterly pinned down. So they're like popping up. They told me a story. They said it was like Pulp Fiction, where it was just like they somehow just kept missing, and it was just like bullets just
Oh,
going
my
around him.
God. Thank God.
My teammate Starnes is having to shoot through this like it was a PVC pipe behind the wall where they had just been peeing in all night. So he's like shooting through there to like at this insurgency. Finally, they get reinforced by the Marines, and they just they fire rockets, M79 grenades, and just wipe this thing out.
Oh, nice.
But I'm in the middle of this moral quagmire where I'm like, what if my guys get killed and then it's my fault?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Whose life is more valuable, right?
Yeah, whose
Yeah.
life is more valuable? And then it's like, but this kid's in it. She doesn't know any better. They probably just paid her family, and her family was like, sure, walk down the street, whatever, no big deal.
Right.
And so finally, I hand the rifle back to him. I can't even say anything, and he uses a few expletives, call me sick and whatnot. But he says, "Hey, you're a good man." He's like, "I know sometimes some of us don't have the luxury of making the right choice, but
Wow.
we make that choice every day. And so we're American soldiers, and we don't shoot kids, and especially." And he said, "We sacrifice our men if we have to." And he said, "I know that's like a hard call to make."
Exactly.
And so they ended up making it out alive. We ended up making out of the Battle of Ramadi alive. But that to me is a story that always sticks out, and like a lot of civilians just don't understand that there are increasingly difficult moral situations in war that are very hard to make.
Yeah, unless you're
When do I
there,
pull the
you have
trigger?
no
Yeah.
unless you're there, you have no clue what it's like. I always wish that we could drop people there for like one day just to get an
Yeah.
idea and pull them out safely. It's like, all right, then all the respect would be there, right? So what happened to
Yeah.
that girl afterwards? Did you see her again?
Yeah, we saw her at the
Oh my
outpost.
gosh.
So we're like, don't do that.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
like you said, it might have been her dad or her mom. It's like it's
Mhm.
like, here, do you got to do this? We need to eat or whatever, right?
Oh, they would pay buku money for them to do it. Like even just local civilians, and this was the crazy part. So we had total overwatch of this area.
Okay.
And sometimes they would just come in through an alleyway and they would sling what we call a pizza box IED, which was a pressure plate IED, because at that point we had defeated the radio controlled ones because we had jammers.
Okay.
And we're like, and then it would stop all the, us going into the combat outpost. They'd set up a complex attack. Next thing you know, it's all hell breaking loose. So, but all they would do is they would pay him a couple $1,000 to just sneak down the alleyway and then just sling this IED out in the road.
Wow.
And that way they could watch and observe, see our movements. So I mean, it was kind of a nightmare. And to your point, I feel like the closest people can get to being dropped in that environment is like just go see the movie Warfare. Like that was one day for us. That was
Yeah,
one
but
day. Like,
yeah, but you don't get the emotional feeling of being there, right?
right,
The
that's true.
surrounding. It's kind of like when you make it even easier. It's kind of like when you get to boot camp the first day. It's like,
Yeah.
oh crap, this is
Yeah.
real, right? It's like, what am I doing here, dude? What the
I'm getting
hell?
tossed off of a bus, just thrown and yelled at and
Yeah,
screamed.
exactly,
And
exactly.
yeah.
But yeah, I was remembered when I was in boot camp before I even went to the fleet. It's like, man, people have no clue what everybody goes through, right?
Hmm.
Even just simple like that. Talking about paying people, I know that we paid a lot for information. You were part of that. Can you
Hmm.
elaborate a little bit the mission that you were doing,
Yeah.
how that worked?
So the civil affairs mission is really interesting. I think a lot of people misunderstand it. They think it's all just like hugs and kisses and like hearts and minds and stuff like that. But the thing is you are prepared, depending on where your theater of operations is, to go in as a cultural expert. And most of us know two languages. We have separate skills. We get sent to language school. So I went to the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School. Then I went to Defense Language Institute in Monterey Bay, California to learn another language. And at the same time, you learn about the history, the background, the occasion of everything that's going on in the environment. Because geopolitics, which is just a lot of people misinterpret it, but it deals with how the demography, the demographics of the environment dictate political issues and situations, as well as the geography, the landscape. Let's say, how does especially like for the Levant area, which is like Syria, Israel, how does the Mediterranean Sea and everything, and then the surrounding, Golan Heights play into defense and so on and so forth. So we learn about all of that and how it's going to affect the area. So a lot of soldiers they come into Iraq or Afghanistan, and they're like, oh, they attacked the United States on 9/11 in Afghanistan, so we're just going to go wreck stuff.
Right.
And we're like, well, if you don't understand like the history, like when Alexander the Great marched through there, especially like when you get to Waziristan, which has never been conquered by any invading force ever in the history of warfare.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like Pakistan and Afghanistan just leave it as kind of this autonomous region. The Brits just got totally jacked up there. The Soviets got jacked up there.
Mm,
We were smart enough to be like, we're not gonna screw with it.
right.
So just recognizing like, well, why did the Taliban rise to power? Like, what is the influence that it has here? How does the desert and the opium trade and the hash trade affect, the financial aspect of Afghanistan? So most people don't think about that stuff as
Right.
far as war
Exactly. Yep.
fighting when it's really, really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so within our mission, it was crucial to know those elements and those environments. And I would always tell people that, we got to see the best of war and the worst of war. So we were busy doing either reconstruction efforts and working on civil military operations to bridge the civilian soldier divide and minimize civilian interference on the battlefield. So a lot of times I said, you either made a lot of friends or you got shot at a lot.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So you're busting in a building and you're the guy with the interpreter, and it's either going to go really well, it's a family, and even then it's kind of, you don't know, or it's going to go really bad because people start shooting at you. So it's just really being prepared for the knowledgeable side of, civil affairs, and then also the war fighting side for when it all hits the fan.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, it's great to see the high level picture of everything, right? Because like you said, most people just see one thing, they have blinders on, and it's like, hey,
Mhm.
this is all I'm looking at. Kind of like your example with the little girl, right? A lot of people weren't thinking that backstory. It's like, hey, she's getting paid, her parents are getting paid, she's just doing what her family told her, right? So
Hmm.
that's pretty cool. So did you guys go out to informants and pay them or families to get more information?
We never directly paid, so that was more human, like your human intelligence, and
Okay,
like that was left up to more the military intelligence. There were some asymmetrical warfare units there. The
okay,
SEALs would do it, but a lot of times they would do it inappropriately. Like I remember when we first got into Afghanistan, there was a special activities unit like on our base. And they would just show up with backpacks full of cash. And again, they don't know like the Afghan culture, which is I'll sell out my uncle for like 5 cents.
oh my gosh,
So you
right.
show up with a backpack full of cash, suddenly everybody's a
I don't,
terrorist,
I don't think
you
that's
know?
just in Afghanistan, by the way.
Right, right. They're like, I don't like my uncle, so he's a
Right,
bad guy. He's
right.
been, talking to the Taliban. Whereas by one of the things that we did is we created those connections and relationships with the local populace. And the more that they get on your side, the more that they're willing to feed you kind of that information.
Nice.
A great example of that was during Operation Murfreesboro, which was kind of one of the closing engagements of the Battle of Ramadi. A couple of my teammates were down in the Malab district, which is near Camp Corregidor, and they're going out to clear. And they go into this home, and the interpreter stops them because they know that the civil affairs guys, my teammates, and he was like, "Look, man, this didn't come from the family, but there are IEDs in the wall.
Oh
So
wow.
if you go out that way, you're going to get blown up." And unfortunately, the infantry lieutenant wanted to go that way, and they got blown up. So
He still did it? Oh my
yeah, he
God.
still did it. So it is
Some
what it is.
hard-headed people sometimes, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you for those stories, brother. I really appreciate it. So transitioning out, you probably had a great plan already set up, becoming a successful entrepreneur or working Fortune 500, becoming a CEO. Can you tell us about that journey when you were leaving the service?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. I feel like the only people that are set up for success after they leave the military are the SEALs right now. It's like their own brand.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
And
like, you're
that's
gonna become an entrepreneur and a SEAL.
well, like you were
So,
saying, back when you were first getting in, most people didn't know Green Beret or
mhm.
Rangers or Recon or MARSOC. Nobody knows those guys, but it's
Right.
everybody, they get promoted so much on TV. So, but go ahead anyway.
Yeah. So when I got out, I was transitioning into the reserves. I was going through a divorce. My wife had left while I was overseas. I was one of those dudes who just, basically got the
That never happens in the service, by the way.
never happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody knows somebody, and I was one of those somebodies.
I'm part of
Yeah.
that too, by the way. Yeah,
Yep.
yep,
Yeah. It's like they say, man, like Jody got your girl, whether
yeah.
no matter how it ended. And unfortunately, like that's what most people don't realize. The Dear John letters are real more often than not now. They're Dear John phone calls, which is what happened with me.
Or text.
Um, yeah, or text. Yeah, text
Right,
now. So I came home, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. And my wife had moved to Houston to be close to her family because, we were doing this was during the surge, so we were doing 15-month deployments. And then really you have to remember that with train up time, you're
right.
looking at 2 years.
Yeah,
And so when I told her like this is what's going on, she said, "Hey, I want to move to Houston to be close to my family." And I said, "All right, cool, you can do that." And then she was like, we should probably start thinking about buying a house and getting on with our lives and whatnot after you get home, so you can be done, go into the reserves, find a job. And I was like, that's probably a good idea. I'll almost be 30 at that point, and
right.
most of my 20s have just been con consumed by combat. Um, so I literally came home. She wouldn't pick me up from the airport. That was dope. So I had to rent a car and get a map because the iPhone 1 had just come out, so we didn't
Oh
have
wow.
the
Okay.
maps embedded.
Yep.
So I'm like looking on this map, tracing this route, I'm like, how do I get to this house that I've never been to? Um, and when I get there, it's like just boxes everywhere. It's empty. She meets me to like let me in, and I'm just like, this sucks.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm in Houston, Texas. I don't know anybody. I don't know
Right.
anybody there. And luckily my best friend Bill calls and he's like, "Hey man, I have been trying to get a hold of you. I'm really sorry. I heard what happened. And I had just turned my phone back on. You know, we've been overseas. That's what you did. You turned your phone off because we didn't have the texting not the capabilities that everybody has
Right.
today. You know,
Exactly.
this
Yep.
is, yeah. And so I'm like, he's like, "Hey, why don't you just drive to Austin tonight and come stay with me?" And so I was like, okay. So I don't have a job. She cleared out a lot of our bank account. But I was so out of it
Yeah.
that I hadn't
It didn't
really
matter.
realized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wasn't really thinking of it. You know, there was like a couple thousand in there, and she was like, "Yeah, you can have that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Because like again, we're getting like BAH, we're getting like I was killing it making money over there, and she was working too,
Okay.
and so there should have been buttloads. When I think about this 20 years later now, I'm like, come on, you know.
Right.
But you know, your head's not in the right space, so I end up I'm still in uniform, you know.
Oh, wow.
I haven't unpacked, and so I'm like, yeah, man, I guess I'll be there in like an hour or two. So I drive to Austin, Texas, and I just start living on this couch. And I'm like, I'm not gonna stay in Houston. I don't know anybody. And so I just, you know, I called her one day and I was like, "Hey, I'm moving to Austin. I don't know what we do at this house." So,
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
and I just continued to live on my friend's couch for a while because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I mean, I could have stayed in Houston, but there was like nothing there, you know.
Right.
It was an empty house, so I was like, I'll just live on. I was like hitting every veteran stereotype. I'm like drinking a lot at this point. I'm like living on my friend's couch. You know, I'm really depressed. I'm like crying in the showers, like, and I just like, man, I got to do something. And so I started applying for jobs.
Okay.
And I find, luckily, my background and my career, as far as everything, aligns with this geopolitical think tank, and they're looking for a graphic designer, and I got my degree. So I literally start my career at age, I think 29,
Okay.
28, 29. Um, and I'm like, and most of my friends who had, you know, gotten their degrees in like design and web development and everything, they got a good 8 years on me at this point. So I'm like an old dude in
They
this
have their
like
portfolio and
entry
everything all set
level
up. It's
position.
like, can you
Yeah.
show us your portfolio? No, I can't.
Yeah. I'm like shooting people, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so I start work there and I'm just like, I'm going to put my nose to the grind. And it's so funny. I meet so many other GWAT veterans, so many Iraq and Afghanistan veterans that did the exact same thing that I did,
Oh,
where it
wow.
was like, I'm going to put my nose to the grind. I'm never going to talk about this and I'm going to get busy like being successful.
Exactly. Yep.
And the problem is like, I just come from a really traumatic, you know, decade basically. And I was like, I'm not going to deal with this stuff. And it just kind of starts to eat at you.
Yep.
And then eventually it'll all just bubble over to the surface. And so I spent a lot of years in counseling, and then when more stuff would surface, I did, you know, EMDR therapy. And just it really, I think the turning point for me was in 2016. um, I had started working for a nonprofit in mental health that was in the music industry, started by the lead singer of this Grammy-nominated metal band, August Burns Red. Jake Lors was their founder, and he just wanted to help his fans. And he would get a lot of veterans that would come up to him and start talking about how they listened to his music while he was overseas, and the lyrics helped them or whatever. And he was like, "Man, we need some vets to help this." And I was like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't talk about
Right.
that stuff. And and so as I dug into like my mental health work and started getting certifications, I just realized like you know, everybody kept talking about PTSD. There's like, oh,
Right.
it's PTSD, it's PTSD. I was like, this is not PTSD. What the heck is going on? Because post-traumatic stress disorder is it's a response to a traumatic stressor that happened. So like
Exactly. Yep.
perfect example is, you know, you always hear like woman goes down, dark alley gets raped, and dark alley won't go down dark alleys. Veterans don't do fireworks because fireworks remind them incoming mortars, rocket attacks, so on and so forth, which was true for me. I was like, I don't want to do 4th of July. And one of the ways that you overcome post-traumatic stress disorder is you can do exposure stimuli, which is where you do small increments of increased, stimuli to that. So like throwing poppets on the ground, for
Right,
example,
exactly.
for
Yeah.
fireworks, eventually shooting Roman candles. And that's how I desensitized myself to it. And so, they were like, well, this is resistant PTSD. So they started calling it complex PTSD. And I'm just like, that doesn't make sense either. And then Bright Divinity and Dr. Jonathan Shea coined this term moral injury. And it's the psychological damage that occurs when you have to do things that violate your sense of right and wrong, like basically killing another human being, shooting a woman or child, the gallows humor, putting your friend's body parts back with like stuff that's just really traumatic for you.
Right.
And it becomes like a bruise on your soul that like when it's touched, it flinches, it hurts, but like an internal method. And then my friend Tyler Gray, whose book is coming out, has this kind of groundbreaking theory called LTSD, which is lack of traumatic stress disorder. And he said most of us have chaos addictions, which I have found that to be true in my life. I like cannot sit still. And if we feel calmest when things are high pressure, and when things are going wrong, and we're like, I'll fix this, I'll do this, and and my wife is always like, why can't you just sit still on the couch with your thoughts and not like have to be doing something? And
Right.
I like that chaos.
Exactly.
And that's what you learn. You learn to embrace that chaos. So there's multiple reasons within this. And so I really didn't start adjusting until I wrote this article in 2016 for Medium about moral injury and like how everybody keeps talking about PTSD, but that's not what we're facing. And it just went stupid viral. All these veteran places picked it up and it had like 1 million views. Like I was like, what happened? And so I went to my editor and I was writing at this point and I said, hey, I was writing a lot about like mental health stuff or, self-help. And I said, hey, I'm having a little bit of writer's block. What do you guys want me to write about? And they're like, man, that war stuff was awesome. You got to
Okay.
write more about that. I was like, I don't write about that. I was like, I don't do that. I don't
Right.
talk about it. And my editor, her name's Steph, she was awesome. She was like, well, that's a travesty. And I was like, what? And she was like, look, she goes, less than 1% of you have fought in the longest running wars in US history. She's like, she's like about 1% of you, like from World War II to now, have served. She's like, we're losing all these stories that could help us prevent wars, to help us understand you more to the annals of history because you guys come home and you're this silent brotherhood. She goes, we need to know about the humanity, complexity, and barbarity of combat so that we don't repeat these mistakes. And people are curious, and she pointed out, like, she's like, look at it. Like, people love Star Wars, which is basically warfare. People love Marvel movies, which is warfare.
Right. Exactly.
There's
Yep.
this something inside the human psyche that is obsessed with
Battle.
warfare
Yep.
and battle. And so, and our, Andor, like, is one of the top TV shows right now, warfare. So, I was like, man, I think she's right. And it just made me realize that I was being a coward and I wasn't dealing with my stuff. And so that's really when, for me, I think when that reintegration process truly happened was
Was that was
10
that
years after
more
the fact.
was that more about getting the word out and writing it down, or was it more about you helping? You knew that it was going to help others that help you overcome that, do you think?
I think it was more of kind of like a therapeutic outlet for me,
Okay.
honestly.
All right.
Um, I truly believe most veterans want to talk about their experiences.
Yep.
I know I did. I remember like when I first got home from Afghanistan, I wanted to talk about like all this stuff. And I remember telling this really dark story, and people were just horrified. And I'm laughing. We do that.
Yep.
And suddenly, like people are either being polite, and doing the, or you can
Yeah,
we
you
get
could see
really
it.
good.
Yeah, you could
Mhm.
see it. Yeah, for
And that's the
sure.
thing they don't realize. Like veterans are really good at reading body language. Like we
Right.
just, you have to read it in warfare and everything. And And so I was just like, oh, I need to shut up. I don't, they think I'm a monster.
Right.
And so I could always talk with my vet buddies, and that's why there's this misconception that like veterans only talk about veterans because they went through the same experience. But really for me is like I had two civilians that really just kind of helped me process through like a lot of what I had been through and were open about the stuff that they had struggled with in their lives. I just began to see similarities, as
Yeah.
opposed to differences. And I just realized like all of humanity suffers at some point, and that's the
Exactly. Yeah.
unifying connection for us, whether that's in combat or, having a death in the family of somebody that's super close to you, you can relate, losing
Right.
your friend in combat or like losing your best friend at home. So, um, that for me, it really became kind of like that therapeutic outlet. And then just knowing that I wanted to tell my story, and if other veterans could feel safe telling their stories to other people, then more people would open up about
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
But you had to train the civilians first, and so I do a lot of that now. Like I've spoken to Volunteers of America who deal with a lot of homeless veterans and just veterans in general, and service in that area. I taught a class to Colorado State University's master's program, where they're dealing with military veterans, first responders. It's a psychology class, and it was just
Nice.
explaining like, look, I know most of you are not vets or first responders, so like, here's how you can begin talking to them. And so many people just do it backwards. Like the civilian populace does it backwards. Like I'm sure you can relate to this. Like one of the first questions you get, even Tom Segura makes this joke with his dad, who's a Vietnam vet. He's like, yeah, I don't. Everybody asks like, did you kill anyone? And I'm like,
Right.
if I say yes, what does that do? If I say no, what does that do? Like, there, and I'm like, why do you want to know that? Like, that's such an, like it. And for me, I explain it now. I'm like, that would be like asking a rape victim, tell me all about your rape. Like,
Right.
dude, I want to hear all the details. Like, how did you feel about it?
Right.
And like that's the question that they lead with to
Exactly.
us. I'm
Yeah.
like, let's go to the immediate source of your trauma. I don't even want to get to know you. I need to know this stuff. Like, tell me about the most horrific moments of your life. Tell me about warfare. And what I discovered is we don't share those stories until we feel comfortable with you and that you are a person that we can confide in and that you're going to have our back. And the same way that you would build a friendship with somebody to where, you're willing to be open and honest with them, you have to do the same with a vet in your life. But instead, most of them want to go exactly to the source of trauma and not build those relationships and have that trust or that agency with a veteran or a combat veteran. And so therefore it just shuts them down.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think most, like we were talking about the percentage of people all the time, right? You're always going to have that, but I like your analogy about sharing the whole story because if you're like for a veteran telling somebody about a battle and they don't get it and they look at us weird, you got to build up the story from the beginning for them to understand a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the Rocky movie, right? You see him
Hmm.
struggling, building up, but if you show just the brutal fighting, people would like, oh, what is this? They wouldn't feel they wouldn't have the same result. So you said you did some psychedelics as well?
No, not psychedelics. I did ketamine
Oh,
infusions
ketamine.
though.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Yeah, yeah. The VA, for some reason they stopped doing them for us, which is really weird. It was bizarre. You have to be like extremely suicidal now. I was doing it for chronic pain and mental health. They were like, we'll do both.
okay,
Just because my back is totally jacked up, and I'm sure like that's most of our problem. And so they were like, hey, you're headed towards a spinal fusion. We need to like fend this off. And I talked to Scott about it. He's already had a spinal fusion. I was like, dude, I don't want one. He's
oh
like,
my
mine
gosh.
worked great. Um, so we, so within that, I was just shocked. And once I got into the studies about it, like it just does something to the brain with the neuroplasticity of the brain and rewire stuff. And my wife noticed, she was like, you are so much more calm. Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
and I was like, yeah, man, I feel awesome. And what's funny is my brother's a nurse anesthetist, and we go skiing every year with this anesthesia group because I live in Colorado. So I just go up and I meet his anesthesia group. We ski together and stay for like a weekend up in like Vail and Beaver Creek area. And I was talking about it with them, and they're like, oh, yeah. They're like, when I intubate patients, They said if I intubate them with, another drug, like Dilaudid or whatever they use, I don't know. I'm picking generic names out of
Yeah,
my
it's
butt.
fine. Yeah.
I am not a nurse anesthetist. He's like, we'll put them under and there's no change. He said, but when I put people under with ketamine and they go see their follow-up appointments, and they're asked how they're doing, they're always like, man, I feel awesome. I feel
Wow.
really good. Like, this week has been great. And I noticed the same thing too. Like, so, and I was talking, with the provider and everything. They're like, yeah, we get a ton of people that were like extremely suicidal, multiple attempts, and then suddenly like they're holding down a job and they're doing well and they feel better. So it's wild. It's a paralytic and I don't know what the angel something or other. My brother
Okay.
explains all this stuff to me, but it's also has this kind of psychedelic component to it, to where you're like just you disassociate and like your brain just gets to travel to all these environments. And I remember the first couple times that it happened to me, I would always drop to what I called the Mad Max world. And in my
Okay.
book, I reference Mad Max a lot because like it feels like the Road Warrior in Iraq and that environment. And I was like, that's weird. And so it happened for several times for about half the year. And it was always fine. But what I realized is that my brain was dealing with like unresolved trauma. So
Okay.
it was dropping me to that level to deal with it on subconscious base that I didn't fully understand. And then just eventually it stopped happening and I felt better.
Wow. That's awesome. That's good. Good to hear. I'm gonna have to introduce you to one of my one of my buddies. I had him on my podcast, I think like 4 or 5 months ago. His name's Matt Parr, Green Beret. Is he Green Beret Delta Force or Army Ranger? One of the two. But he actually hit a tree on a night jump,
Mm,
like 30 years ago. Broke his jaw, hurt his back, was on traction for about a year, for with his back pain and in pain for 30 years, and he found a solution that just healed him about a year and a half ago. So I'll introduce you to him
yeah.
afterwards, let you know about that. Can you tell us a little bit about your Christian journey? Because I know that you
Yeah.
recently doing quite a bit with that, and I think that helps a lot with your brain balance as well. If you could talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that, that'd be awesome.
So I mean I tell a lot of people I grew up in a Christian household in the 1980s and 90s. Unfortunately, a lot of it was very much masked by morality. The church environments that was a part of were part of like the prosperity gospel and word of faith. It's like basically if you have enough faith, God will drop a Maserati on your front porch kind of crap, like Joel Osteen
Olstein, that's what
craziness.
came to my mind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, and honestly, a lot of churches now are just subversively kind of doing it. Like you have your pastors now that are making millions, and you have
right.
urban poor in the congregation. I was like, how does that work?
That's
That
almost like what
seems,
Jesus was doing, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah. I'm like, that's exactly what he was doing. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I was very, very antagonistic towards faith. I left the church when I was like 17. I was like, this is all garbage.
Right.
And every church that I was seemed to be a part of was like embroiled in scandal. Like the last one when I was a teenager, my parents were like, hey, we want you to find your own path and everything. And so I started attending this church and it was this really dynamic communicator and he had been on this like Christian programming called Fire by Night. And come to find out, like him and his wife are swingers. He's doing the secretary, he's embezzling a buttload of money. His wife's addicted to Oxycontin, like just crazy stuff, man.
Right.
And not much has changed. Like you have the whole Mark Driscoll crap and Mars Hill and all these people that they just put a macho face on it now. They're like, Jesus was a UFC fighter, and I'm like, okay,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Yeah.
whatever, dude. Um, so I was just like, I think this is all. I took the Marxian approach where it's like religion is an opiate for the masses. And so I studied, in college a lot, just other major different world religions, everything from Islam, and especially when I was overseas, I wanted to know a lot about Islam. And then Buddhism and Hinduism, and all my art classes, like you have to study like the Hindu statues and Roman and Greco and so I was always fascinated by the tales and like how humanity had, you know, picked up religion in some way, shape, or form. But I took more of like kind of that nihilistic approach. And when I got to Afghanistan, I was like, I started to really struggle because I was like, what is the point of the human condition? Like, and you know, most people, there's intrinsic and extrinsic value, like
Yep.
purpose.
Correct.
So like your intrinsic purpose could be to like for me, I could say, you know, my purpose in life is to be an award-winning author and, you know, a great dad and so on and so forth. You know, if it was Babe Ruth, you know, hit 100 home runs or whatever. But when you get to extrinsic purpose, like what is the purpose of Homo sapiens as a
Right.
species?
Correct.
And you take a look around and we're like, man, we are awesome at killing, wounding, and maiming each other. Like, and for all the talk of the enlightenment and how much, so much more enlightened we are these days, like, I hate the people that talk about that. It just shows me how foolish they are and they don't know history. Because I'm like, oh, we can literally blow up the world now. You want to get on to the Middle Ages about like dark stuff? I was like, we drop nukes on each other. We can destroy the world, and we don't even know why we would do that. That's crazy to me. Like, we
Right.
can literally destroy the world, but nobody's been able to explain, well, why would we do that? Hubris. Like there's something inside the human heart that is bent in kind of a way towards destruction and chaos. And so I was like, man, if the, you know, I had taken a scientific approach, which is the universe ends in 3.5 billion years with the entropic heat death of the universe, where the sun turns into a red dwarf. And we're done as a species unless we figure out how to like terraform other planets or interstellar travel or whatever. But even then, we're probably just going to be conquest and killing each other, whatever. So it's like, it was a pretty bleak outlook, you know? And so I was like, man, I think this is when people start killing themselves because they like get to
It's like, what the hell am I
this
doing here? Right.
yeah, what the hell am
Yeah.
I doing here on this planet? Like, what's the point? And so I just started wrestling with that and started looking into, you know, the world religions and just was curious. And then eventually I met this priest while I was in Ramadi.
Okay.
And he had been in the Tet Offensive. Out of
Wow.
150 dudes in his platoon, he was one of six to survive.
Holy cow.
And I was like, "How'd you become a priest?" He was like, "Tet Offensive." He was like, and he got wounded in action, and he's like, "When the fighting was at its fiercest, I asked God to save my life, and He did." And
Wow.
so he was just a guy that I could relate to, and he was very analytical, very scientific, very knowledgeable, and I like that. So I was like, "Okay, I'll explore more of this." And so when I came home, you know, my friend could just tell that I was getting worse. And so and here's the crazy part, he was an atheist. And he was like, "Hey man, can I take you to church?" And I was like, "What's that going to do for either one of us?" And he was like, "I don't know, maybe you can meet a nice Christian girl or something." I was like, "Yeah, that's what I need after a divorce, buddy." Um, And so, anyways, I started attending this church, and it's a church in Austin, Texas. The lead pastor's name is John Burke. He's since written a New York Times bestselling book called Imagine Heaven. And he's just such a awesome, humble guy. Like not one of those flashy pastors or anything. He drove around a beat up Civic for years. I've been to his house. It was very modest. He wasn't, you know, and he had a large church. And then, you know, the money he made off the book, he just donated to the church. I was like, okay, this is a dude who's legit.
Nice.
Um, and you know, we began a friendship, and I just asked him questions, and he was a skeptic and a cynic before he converted and was an engineer. So he had a very analytical brain, and then he just started walking me through stuff, and I was still wrestling with that question of, you know, okay, if God knows everything and if he's good, how can he allow evil if he's, you know, able to stop
Yeah, a lot
it?
of people struggle with that. Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
so he just kind of led me through. He talked about like how it's an inconsistent answer. He said because if he said if God wanted to stop evil, he'd have to stop all evil, which would mean you and me, because each of us have done evil, whether in thought, action, word, or deed. And so the human species can't exist. And he
Right.
said, so we're allowed free will and to make our choices. And he said, God didn't create evil. He created the capacity of a world with evil, and humans have actualized it. And so I ended up going down this rabbit hole where I've discovered this German mathematician, theologian, logistician. His name's like William Gottfried Leibniz, I think. And basically, he got into string theory and posited that out of all the worlds that God could have created, so like imagine a multiverse like what you see in the Marvel world. And
Yep.
this was
Yep.
long before that happened. He said, out of all the worlds that God could have created, this one accomplishes the most good, saves the most people, and gets his will accomplished, but he can still like finagle and manipulate because he can enter time, space, and it's paradox in so many ways. And so eventually, I started reading guys like C.S. Lewis and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but I was also reading like secular humanists like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. And I was like, and I liked the secular humanists, but I really hated their theory of like, okay, well, life is absurd, and once you accept the absurdity of life, then you'll be free. And I had done that to a degree, and in the myth of Sisyphus, he was like, you have to imagine Sisyphus is happy just pushing this endless boulder up the hill once he's accepted his lot in life. And I was like, I am in a torture chamber already, and I have accepted that, and everything sucks, and it has brought zero relief to me. I was like, these are poor,
Poor
reasonings.
recommendations. Yep.
Yeah, poor recommendation. And so as I began to explore the Christian faith and look at the other religions, I found it both intellectually stimulating and emotionally satisfying. And I was like, I think this is where I'm going to land. And the more that I got into it, the more I was like, yeah, I think this is all true. And then that really played a part like for me in my healing journey. And Tyler Gray and other people we've really been positing, and I've been saying this I think since basically like 2010. The unfortunate part about the healthcare system right now is it's very fragmented.
Yes.
It's like if you have a problem, they're either going to tell you to go to counseling, or they're going to tell you to take a pill. And I go, and they're giving people wrong diagnoses. And human beings are emotional, they're intellectual, they're spiritual. People are into like Harry Potter is a great example. Like we all want some supernatural aspect in the world. It's why we love Superman. It's why we love the Harry Potter franchise, and we want to believe that it's true. So there's something deep inside the soul that would suggest that. But we're not treating the whole person, we're treating aspects of them. And so when you take a whole person approach, you have to address it all. So like imagine if I came to you and I said, "Hey, I'm depressed."
Right.
And you said, "I took a pill, man, it made me better, so you should do the same." But come to find out that I'm depressed because like I cheated on my girlfriend, we broke up. Well, that's not the right answer. That's a
Right.
stupid
Exactly.
answer. You don't
Yeah.
need a pill for that.
Right.
And yet that's what we're doing is we're over prescribing. And I'm not against like medicating people that need to be medicated, but I think we are totally overdoing it and doing it in the wrong way, shape, and form. Like if you're bipolar, you probably need a pill.
Right.
But if you like are dealing with some emotional or soul trauma wounds and other stuff, there's other aspects that you need to do. And the thing that I explain, especially for the warrior aspect, there's a very spiritual component to it. And in times past, when the Crusades were going on, even though the Roman Catholic Church had said, yes, this is what we're condoning, they believed that it was wrong to take another human life. And so when knights returned from battle, they had to go through a period of purification with the community and the church. The Navajo warriors did the same thing after their battles. They would have to go through purification rites that involved a lot of it. If you look at World War II, we had the community largely involved in the homecoming, the welcoming. They spent months on boats traveling back to the United States to
Yes. Absolutely.
deprocess, whereas a
100%.
warrior today can be in battle one day and then home the next, and it's just jarring. And for the GWAT in Iraq and Afghanistan, like they were just checked out. Like the American public was just out to lunch, man. They didn't give a
Right.
rip.
Right. They didn't care.
Um,
Yep.
and so the spiritual side of it that I explain to a lot of people is that when you look at war, it is a very spiritual experience because it's like playing God. You have the power to protect life or take it away. And there's something spiritual that happens when you point an M4 carbine rifle at another human being and send that person to the great unknown. Like, regardless of your beliefs, none of us can say with certainty what happens when we die. Now, I think I know with certainty, you probably do too. Lots of
Right.
other people watching this are going to say, oh, yeah, it's the great nothingness, or it's nirvana, or it's, eternity with Jesus. Like, and we think we know, but like on a basic level, none of us have a formative consensus.
Right.
So when you point that M4 carbine rifle at a man, you pull the trigger, you're going to send him into the great unknown, and there's something deeply spiritual about that. And so if you don't incorporate the spiritual aspects to the healing of a person, then you're going to miss out. And you're not going to treat the whole person. You're just going to treat a fragment of them, which is why, like, you have a lot of these places like Bright Divinity that is doing the leading research on soul wound repair for our warriors, which I think is really, really important aspect to treat each person and our warriors when they come home from battle. And so, spirituality and faith became a vital driving force towards that healing.
Nice. Love it. Yeah, actually, I had Tyler Grant on a couple episodes ago, which is great. Great guy. Love him. I know his book is coming out pretty soon as well, right? You mentioned before
Yeah.
we started here. And I also had another gentleman on by the name of Fred Galvin on. I don't know if you know Fred or
Oh,
not.
yeah. He did the Few Bad Men, I think,
Yes,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But we were talking about, and all these operators I've had on, all these professional entrepreneurs I've had on, that have struggled with PTSD, TBI. It seems like a lot of them did get that pill thrown at them, right, at first,
Yeah.
but eventually they figured out, hey, there's other ways to deal with this, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's stem cells, but more importantly was the three pillars, right? And I think I talked to Tyler about this as well. There's the physical, the spiritual, and what's the other one? Emotional, I think it is. Yeah,
Emotional.
yeah, the
Yeah.
emotional. So you have to have all those in balance, right? If you don't have your body in balance, it's really hard to get your mind in balance, right? So there's a
Hmm.
lot of things to make sure that you're trying to achieve every day. Just like uh, you know, uh, just like right now you're juggling so many different businesses, right? You have a mission. You have a
Yeah.
mission. I'm sure you're doing some physical stuff daily, right? You're
Hmm.
you're reading many books right now. So I think once you have that mission in front of you and you're able to balance, there's other ways besides medication. But there, like you said, there is some stuff that you may have to stay on medication, but look for alternatives. Talk to other veterans, like reach out to everyone about the different support groups. You mentioned one called Bright. What was it called?
Bright Divinity, and it's their soul repair center. So they
Okay,
have
nice.
tons of information on that. Warrior's Heart is a big one that I recommend. Also, I personally donate to an organization called Heroes and Horses,
Okay,
where they do same as like Warrior's Heart. It was founded by Micah Fink, who was a SEAL and CIA operator. And great, great guy. Love that dude. He's kind of a stoic in nature, but same thing. They take everything from diet to equine therapy to cold plunges to and like one of my favorite stories that Micah told me, and I was like, yeah, this guy's legit.
okay,
He said that they had this guy that they were supposed to go on this trek into the mountains, and he was like, it's June, and he's like, we're in Montana, and sometimes it snows in the mountains. And he was like, so the group heads out, and he's like, I look at one of my facilitators, and he's like, this guy's he's not gonna make it. And so he gets that guy and takes him up himself, and he said, they're halfway up this mountain, and he's like making these like dying camel noises and stuff,
oh wow,
and he's like, what is going on? And he's like, the snow's falling and whatnot. And he's like, dude, what is wrong with you? And he was like, how many meds do they have you on right now? And the guy's like, 11.
oh my
And
gosh,
he
one more
goes,
count.
can you even feel the snow on your face? He's like, do you know what's going on? And he's like, no.
Oh my gosh.
And he just looks at the guy and he goes, "You're going to climb this mountain or you're going to die. I'm going to let you die here." And he goes, "But it doesn't matter because you're already dead right now."
Oh my gosh.
And
Holy
told him that.
cow.
And he said the guy graduated the program. It was the kick in the butt that he needed. He got off all 11 medications and is doing good.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
If you get some of
yeah.
those links, I like to post them on the podcast for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something Tyler Gray was saying the other day, or when I had him in the podcast as well, it's like you have to be your own like project manager of your own life, right?
Hmm.
Because everyone that you go see, they don't always have your best interest. It might just be, hey, here's something for you to make you better, and just keep looking for answers for yourself.
Right.
Speaking of books, can you tell us a little bit about Where Cowards Go to Die? Uh, you know, what did you hope your readers would take away from your book?
Yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to do with my book was just kind of take a different look at the global war on terror and the things that our soldiers endured and faced, but also came home to. And there are tons of books, and this is not to knock anybody, but like the predominant genre is about battle, 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 battle. I'm a badass,
Right, exactly.
or
Yep.
it's like wake up at 4 a.m. and mainline protein and seize the day, carpe diem and be a SEAL or whatever.
Right,
The
right,
SEALs
right.
are killing it right now. Again, they have their own brand.
I've
They're doing their
I've been
thing.
trying to find a book written by a SEAL, but I can't find one. Oh,
And
God.
so for me, I was like, what if I took it from like the human side where, it's my memoir and we're going through my journey and I deal with the cowardice that lurks in the human heart. Um, and what I realized, like in my own journey, was that each of us daily and throughout our lives have a decision to either die as a coward or to kill the coward that's inside of us. Because there are all things that we don't want to do. There are things that we don't want to address, that we don't want other people to know about. And it's that dark night of the soul. And for me, initially it was I didn't want to deal with my crap when I got home. I was like, and what I came to realize was that if I didn't take the courageous steps to get better, then all I was doing was hurting other people, and I would die as a coward because I never dealt with the internal battles that I faced. On the flip side, if you do decide to take those courageous steps and get better, it's going to feel like a part of you has died because the coward is going to want to keep you stuck and safe. And there's nothing courageous about staying stuck and safe exactly where you're at. And my friend likes to call it the courageous middle. He's like, when you're at 0% and you haven't even started, he was like, there's no fear of rejection, there's no fear of failure because you're already where you're at. He said, and when you're at 100%, you've already arrived. You've completed that journey and you're good now. He said, but everything from 1% to 99% is the courageous middle. And he's like, and that's where the real work takes place. And so I realized that like I could either work to kill the coward inside me, that I could get better, or I would end up dying as a coward. And so you kind of see through my lens and viewpoint the times in my life early on throughout Iraq, Afghanistan, where there was this cowardice that kind of ebbed through, and I had to have choices that I made, whether I was going to step up to the plate and sacrifice or I was going to stand back and let other people, take that bullet or take that hit or just, take my hands off approach to it. And so I wanted to take a totally different approach that wasn't like I'm the hero of this story. I wanted people to really see that like I was kind of like an anti-hero. I was like kind of bizarro Superman for like a long time.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, and I don't paint myself in the greatest light. I mean, I remember I went on Mike Ritland's podcast and got absolutely destroyed afterward because I told this story that
Yeah,
was
I watched
harrowing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was about dogs. Like, and you can go see it and they just, man, and those are all dog lovers and everything. And so they just wanted to crucify me afterwards. And I was like, hey man, I was honest.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I even had people email me, and then they're like, if I ever see you on the street, I'm gonna beat your face in and all this. I was just
Oh
like,
my
okay, good luck,
gosh.
buddy. And what they don't know is like I know how to find them, and I like looked all these people up, and I was like, no, there's no way they're winning that fight. So,
Oh my gosh.
but
Yeah.
even that, I'm a peacemaker these days, so I was just, yeah.
Oh, you know what? When you're in battle, when you're doing stuff, it's like you're not thinking 100% clearly all the time, and especially if you're was it your commander or captain, whatever, had mentioned something to do, to do it. It's like, oh, this is okay to do, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised. Mike, did you see Mike lean over the desk after you told him that?
No, he asked a couple questions. He was like, "I'm pissed off."
Okay,
And we
yeah.
talked offline about it, and I was like, "Look, man, like, I've been a dog owner most of my life. I'm gonna get one. Like I love this stuff, but you get in these environments and you don't know,
Yeah,
like you don't know what you don't know." And like I ended up talking to a couple of my friends who were in like CAG and which is combat applications, who are the Delta guys, and then also other infantry guys. I was like, "Hey man, did you guys do this?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." They're
okay,
like,
yeah.
"We just didn't."
Just
They're
didn't
like, "I
talk
would."
about it. Yeah, we didn't want to look
Yeah,
like the
we
bad.
knew that
We didn't
people
want to
would
look
light us
like the
up.
bad guy.
Which and I it goes
Yeah,
back to my entire point when that was
yeah.
the point that I made. I said, look, I told you a really harrowing story that made me look like a monster, and you guys responded to me like I am a monster. And so that's why we
Yeah,
don't
I-
tell these
I'm definitely looking
stories.
like I mentioned before we started. I'm gonna download the book next week. I got two or three other ones that I'm going through right now, but definitely download or read his book. Great stories in there. I already saw a couple on there, so if you want to find out a little bit more about this story, go on there. I think it's amazing. So you and Scott Husing, do you guys work on a project as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So we got to connect years later after my book had dropped, and I just randomly contacted him and was
Oh
like,
no, okay.
"Hey."
Well, you served with them before, right?
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead.
So we
Sorry.
had lost touch,
Okay.
and it was so wild when we reconnected because I sent him a couple photos of like letters of recommendations that he had wrote for me
Oh
of like
wow.
letters of appreciation for the combat operations that we were on, and he was like, "Dude, I got chills. This is crazy." And then he discovered I was a web developer, graphic designer, author, the whole nine yards, and he said, "Hey man, I'm doing this coaching service, and I think we could do a really awesome job and help other veterans tell their stories." And I was like, okay, I'm in. So I started doing all the branding, built the website, built out the press kits, stuff like that. And we've been just closest of friends since then. And he's just such an amazing dude. That dude's connected to like everybody and their dog. And I care so deeply about him, and for us to have reconnected like after all these years and then to go into business. And it was the same thing. I knew Tyler prior to like him ever meeting Scott, and prior to him writing this book or even going to Warrior's Heart and doing rehab and stuff. And I was like, "Dude, why didn't you tell me you're like going through all that stuff?" He's like, "Same reason we don't talk about it. We're
Right.
ashamed." And
Exactly.
I was
Yeah.
like, "Dude, we could have talked about this." But anyway, so he was like, "Hey man, I love you. I respect your writing so much. I have this book." And I was like, "Well, I can help you with that." And so Scott and I acquired the book through Solid Copy, and then we sold it to Post Hill Press, and have just been working with him and Lauren and Geldy, who's one of the co-authors of the book, to just really get this out. And so working with Scott has just been a joy and a blessing. And then he was like, "Hey man, you got to come to the 2-4 reunion at my ranch and
Oh,
in
nice.
uh, in Texas." And he lives close to my in-laws,
Okay.
so yeah, it's exciting. And he was like, "You should become a member of the 2-4." So like I did. I became a life member
Oh,
of this
no way.
Marine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, of
Okay.
the of 2-4 Marine Corps
Yes.
Association, because and they're like, how were you involved?" I was like, "Oh, I fought with them and 1-6 and 3-8 when I was in Ramadi."
That's awesome.
And so now I'm like, yeah, I'm like a partial crayon eater now, and
I only
I've
eat half
even
the
got
crayon, not
the
the whole
blue
thing.
diamond
Yeah.
tattoo here, so you
Oh,
can't really
that's,
see
oh, look at
it.
that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so.
Oh, I love it. That's love. Yeah, I love Scott Hughes. And so basically, you guys will help people tell their story in a book if they have a story to tell. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're a military veteran, first responder, or government executive, and you have a story to tell, and we believe everybody has a story to
Yeah,
tell.
absolutely.
Like, think about it. And like most people are like, oh, the vet market is and the war stuff is oversaturated. I go, have you seen how many books come out daily for romance novels?
That's true.
That market's oversaturated and it's still selling.
Right. Absolutely.
Fantasy, science fiction. There's new novels dropped every day. So like don't get that in your mindset that people don't want to hear my story. They absolutely do. And we just take people from soup to nuts where it's like I have this idea and I want to write my story to okay, here it is. And obviously everything's gonna have to have a unique angle. It can be a military book or whatnot, but you're just telling a different story. So and your stories deserve to be told because there's only 1% of us. That's it.
Yeah, and you're going to relate with other people out there that you may not, the other books may not be relating with people, and so it's going to be great. And how do they get hold of you guys for that?
Solidcopymedia.com, or you can just Google Solid Copy Media. You know, it's the
Okay,
like what we all used to say over the radio, Solid Copy. So just add
nice. I love
media to
it.
the end and you're good to go.
Awesome, awesome. How can a person succeed if they are not sure what they want to do in life right now?
So I get this question a lot. I'm not a life coach, but I swear I do a lot of life
But you've
coaching
been
for
through life. You're
people.
walking through life, brother. So,
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, I used to lead a lot of 20 somethings in my church and stuff, and they're
okay,
just struggling with like purpose. Like, what do I do with my life? You know?
exactly.
Um, and the problem is the mindset of the modern American is like make money and do something. It's why so many parents push their kids to be like lawyers or doctors or other stuff. And then you meet these people and they hate what they're doing.
Exactly. Yep.
And I often ask people if you could do anything in the world, any job in the world, what would you do? But here's the catch, you don't get paid for it. What would you be
Right.
doing? And everybody always has an answer.
Yes.
Like they know what they would be doing. Oh, I'd be doing this or this or this. And I go, well, why aren't you doing that? You know? And and they're like, well, because of XYZ. And I'm like, well, go back to school or you know, if you have to do this, like take those risks. Like there's nothing worse than being miserable in a career environment that you utterly hate. Like I just had to encourage my friend. I was like, you have got to quit your job.
Right.
And he was making hand over fist money.
Okay.
And I was like, all the money in the world is not worth your well-being to where you're just miserable. Like you wake up hating your life every day, you go to sleep dreaming about emails, how your boss is going to yell at you, the whole nine yards. Like there's a freedom inherently in just doing something, and you can go get a job doing something in the meantime to cover the bills. But most of us we let our pride get in the way. So if you're thinking about it, like, and you're like, I know I'm in a toxic environment, I know I hate my job, I know it's affecting my mental health, I know that like I'm not the person that I can be, then quit and go like I have no chance. I've told my wife this. I was like, I'll go take a job at a manager at a grocery store to cover bills. I don't care. The
Right.
problem is most people assume, oh, this stuff is below me. You know, I would go
Exactly.
work at a fast food restaurant. I don't care. I can make it work. And like what's funny is one of my friends just recently did this and he's working two jobs. He's really happy, you know? And he's like, yeah, I work like a part-time over at Dutch Brothers. And then, you know, this is my other gig until I keep building up. And the other thing that you have to remember though is like work is not meant to be fulfilling to a degree. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it can give you purpose. And I tell young people this all the time. There's a reason work is called work and not fun. Because it's work.
Right.
Like sometimes I have fun in my job. Sometimes I get to travel to cool places. But dude, I'm in this period where I'm like, I have so much going on and I'm doing the things that I love, but it's stressful and I don't like it and I want to rest, you know?
Right.
And so there has to be a work-life balance. And the problem
Absolutely.
is everybody is living to work now as opposed to working to live. And for me, I'm like, now just doing my own stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna take a day off. I'm gonna go ski.
Nice.
Like I'll put this stuff off. I don't care. I need to take time for me. Because nobody gets to the end of their life and goes, you know what I wish I would have done? I wish I would have worked more.
Yeah.
And you're not
Exactly.
taking any of that stuff with you.
Yeah.
So good luck.
100%. Yeah. Ever since I started podcasts, I've been talking to a lot of people. It's like I had Bruce Buffer on. He goes, "You got to follow your passion. If you don't follow your
Hmm.
passion, you're not going to be happy." So I started checking into how many people are not happy in their job. I think it was like 80 to 90% of
Right.
people out there. But you get that bait of that large salary in front of you, right? And it's hard to get off that hamster wheel. So,
Yeah.
but it's better to have that
My buddy
balance.
called it golden handcuffs. And I'm
Oh,
like,
there you go.
dude.
Yeah, yeah. It's like here's your paycheck, but you got to do what I tell you. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So thank you for that. What's the best advice a mentor ever gave you about leadership or business?
Um, it's, eh, honestly, probably my mom, to be
Okay.
honest. Yeah. She was at the time, I remember she told me the story about how she was working in a hospital, like cleaning stuff up, and like there was like this poop explosion or whatever, and she went in and did it herself, even though she was like supervisor and manager. And she
Nice.
said, leaders lead from the front, and I will never ask any of my employees to do something that I personally wouldn't do myself.
That's awesome.
And so for me, I have taken that. And then, she said, Benjamin, you're a sledge, and we honor our word even to our own hurt. So like I really try to honor my word as far as so that I can be a man of character and integrity. But it was the same way when I was the executive director of this nonprofit. There was nothing that I did in which I wouldn't ask my employees to do. And so I remember we hit a rough month, and honestly, this goes back to like Simon Sinek stuff. It goes exactly to the military, and this is something that's beat into us. It's that leaders eat last.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in the business world,
Yeah, it's not
many
good.
leaders eat first. The CEOs are just raking hand over fist. They're not doing the work though. That's the most insane thing to me. If workers around the United States just revolted and be like, we're not gonna show up today.
Right.
All of us are on strike. That CEO is not going to make $1 bajillion. Like, and they treat their
But they have the
workers like
handcuffs on,
crap.
so they won't do it. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, but they have their handcuffs on. And so I went to my wife. We hit a hard point. We were low in donations. We had some stuff going on, and you're just going to hit hardships in any business that you run,
Yep.
regardless. And you're going to hit failure. And like what most people don't realize is like starting your own business, like it's not profitable for a couple years. And then on top of that, um, there's always a crisis, and like there might be monetary strains, and people always look at like when you've arrived as opposed to what it took to get there. But with the leaders eat last mentality, I went to my wife and I said, uh, we're not going to make payroll this month unless I don't get paid. And so we're going to pay our employees first, and we're
Nice.
just going to take a hit this month, and it is what it is. And she's like, God will take care of us. And so we did that, and we were able to make it. But I had to eat last, and because I preached certain expectations and standards to my employees, I had to emulate and live them. And if you don't, you're just a hypocrite.
Yeah, I love that. It's servant leadership, right? Just like
Hmm.
Jesus did. He would, he didn't take anything for himself, he healed, helped people every day and nothing for himself, which is amazing. So, Ben, we're almost wrapped up. Thank you so much, brother. How can people follow your journey and connect with you after today?
I mean, honestly, most people like give their website. Mine's really easy. It's my name, benjaminsledge.com. But
Okay.
you can literally Google my name, Ben
Okay.
Sledge or Benjamin Sledge. Everything that pops up is me.
Instagram,
It's just,
Facebook, and all that.
yeah,
Yep.
Instagram, Facebook. Like I said, I was
Amazon for the book. Yep.
yeah, that Barnes and Noble. If you're like, if you prefer indie booksellers, it's everywhere major books are sold. But Amazon is honestly one you're going to get it the fastest. Two, it's on Audible or Kindle if you want to go that route. It's also on
Okay.
Nook and the other Barnes and Noble stuff, and Kobo and IndieBound, and so wherever you want to purchase the book is totally fine. But yeah, if you Google my name, all of that's going to pop up.
Awesome. Love it, brother. And finally, what's one thing you want our listeners to remember about you or what you're doing
About me and what
or
I'm
what you're doing?
doing.
Yep.
Um, Mine would be I've talked a lot about this recently. It seems like there's a lot of division and strife like in the world right now.
Yes.
Um, Everybody has an opportunity each day to make the world a little bit better. It's just dependent upon your attitude and what you're doing. And it's trope, it's trite, but everybody is fighting a battle that you don't know about. Like, and a lot of times, like when people cut me off or things are going on, I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know if like they just lost their mom or something else is going on, something deeper, the issue. But the one agency that we have in our entire lives is the ability to control to how do we respond to a situation or whatnot. And some days I do that well, and other days I don't. But the problem is a lot of us like shouting into the void on Instagram or Facebook and think it's going to make a difference, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
What's going to make a difference in the world around you are your daily interactions and actions with other people. And so if you can remember that, like, and especially thinking about, me as a vet, like here's a call to action for you. Befriend a vet, like become friends with them, learn their story. That's some agency that you have and control over, and you can help them reintegrate into civilian life. But that's your choice and that's your action. It doesn't have to be on them to open up. So instead, reach out, use your life as one of service, and connect with other people. Because at the end of the day, how you impact other people is really going to be the thing that has the most monetary value in your life. The depth of your friendships and your relationships and how you're remembered when you pass away, not how much money you have, not how cool your house or your car was. The reality is that the way that you treat people will determine how people remember you, and your actions daily will inform that for the rest of your life.
Awesome. Love it, brother. Yeah, definitely back to servant leadership, right? It's a
Mhm.
reminds me of a story I heard a long time ago. There was I think it was like a dad and one of a kid on a bus, and this guy just the little girl or little boy was crying a lot and misbehaving, and the guy goes like, "Man, dude, can't you control your kid? What the hell's wrong with you, right?" And the guy came back. It's like, you know what? Sorry, her mom just died last night.
Yeah,
Like
I saw that.
it's
Yeah.
like, it's like, all
Yeah.
right. So that's a great example of what you said. You never know what's going on. So give people grace and love first, right? That's what we're
Right.
here to really do. Uh, excuse me one second. Ben, it's been an absolute honor having you on today, brother, and meeting you. Thank you for your sacrifice, your leadership, and example. You didn't just serve, you continue to serve by standing up and speaking the truth. And thank you so much for being here. For everyone tuning in, if this conversation moved you, shared you, don't just listen to it, amplify it, share it with others, right? These stories need to be heard, like Ben was saying. These lessons can save lives. Stay focused, stay winning. God bless you, and thank you for listening today.